What's up YouTube, Dingo here. Tonight I'm going to talk about my Necro D4 beta character, which is a summoner corpse explosion type of build that I created for the level 25 endgame here. So let's take a closer look. So as you can see, my 6 skills down here we got both of the summoning skills. We got the Ray Skeletons and the Golem. We're using Corpse Explosion. It's our main skill. It's the bulk of our damage, and it's really fun to use. We're using Corpse Tendrils for a little bit of control and vulnerability. We're using Bone Splinters as our generator because it causes vulnerability, and we're using a Decrepify, which I actually have from an item, but you could just pick it up with a point if you could level again to 26, or if you wanted to take a point out of somewhere else to get it early, you could do that too. So basically the build tries to spawn corpses as many ways as possible, including killing enemies, of course. And as soon as you spawn a corpse, in whatever way you spawn a corpse, you instantly corpse explode it, and then that explosion kills some mobs, and then they leave corpses, and you corpse explode those, and then those explosions kill mobs, and they leave corpses, and yada, yada, yada. You basically wait for a corpse to pop, and as soon as a corpse shows up, you chain explosion through the entire pack, and that's usually how everything dies. And it's really powerful. Now, if you have a stronger pack with like elites or bigger mobs, you can throw our Corpse Tendrils in at the beginning, which will group everything up, pull it all together, and then stun it, and then it will cause it all to be vulnerable for 3 seconds, which makes it take more damage, and then you can just spam Corpse Explosion on that tight pack and make it, I mean, it pretty much chews through everything in the game, including like mini bosses and like, if you can get a stack of corpses on a big boss, you can blow them up as well. It's crazy. So that's basically the playstyle, is just manipulating corpses and blowing them up as much as possible and causing vulnerability wherever you can. Let me just kill this. So you can see, as soon as there's a corpse down, I just hit the button. And usually you can just chain corpses throughout the whole pack, as I just did right there. So what are the mechanics that I'm using to spawn corpses? Well, a couple of them come from your minions. So the skellies I'm using are the Reapers, because the Reapers give this 15% chance to cause a corpse to show up when they hit. We need corpse generation wherever we can get it, basically. So I choose the Reapers for that. And then the mages, I actually sacrifice cold, because what this does is it gives you 15% increased damage to vulnerable enemies. So 20% is what the normal modifier is, but if you sacrifice cold mages, you get another 15%. So my vulnerability debuff causes mobs to take 35% extra damage, not 20% extra damage. So that's why I do that. There's nothing really super good outside of this. You can have the mages cause vulnerability here, but things have to get frozen, and that takes a little while, and generally things don't get frozen unless they're sitting in place for a while, and the frost mages have a chance to just cast on them. Which is basically just bosses. So this is more consistent, and you can still cause vulnerability on bosses really easily, so you don't miss out in any way there. And then as far as the Golem goes, I go with Bone, obviously, because it's the only one available, but what I do is I do the first node here, which gives me a corpse whenever the Golem loses 20% of its max life, which is, every once in a while. It's not constantly, but it's frequently enough. And then let's look at the talents. So, because there's a couple corpse generation things here, namely this. So, Hewed Flesh. 12% chance to create a corpse at the target's location, and it's your damage, and you get a double chance against bosses. So, anytime you do damage with an ability, and I do believe it has to be your damage, it's not your minion's damage, but anytime you do damage with an ability, there's a 12% chance to create a corpse where you did that damage, which is, pretty much always on the mob, right? Because you're hitting the mob. So if you create a corpse on the mob, you can instantly corpse explode it. So this is basically a freebie corpse explosion 12% of the time you hit stuff. Now, this is all your damage, including corpse explosion damage. So you can corpse explode, and that hits like 5 mobs, and then there's a 12% chance per those 5 hits for you to get another corpse, even if nothing dies. So this gets really crazy, and it's a very good node. The other big aspect of this build is vulnerability, because you want to be able to make things vulnerable as much as possible. So we have Bone Splinters as our modifier, mainly because it has a 20% chance per hit to make enemies vulnerable, and you can shotgun with this ability. So you get 3 normally, but this first node gives you a 30% chance to fire 5. I thought it was 4. 5 projectiles, so 2 extra projectiles. If you have 50 or more essence, which you almost always will with this build, because if I haven't mentioned it yet, Corpse Explosion costs no essence. It's a free ability. So you're never like grubbing for essence. Corpse Tendrils does cost a little bit of essence, but not a significant amount, and I don't think anything else that we use other than maybe the Curse. Yeah, the Curse does as well. I don't think anything else that we use has an essence cost, a significant one anyway, which basically means that you don't have to worry about your resource very much with this build, which is super nice. I played a Druid as well on the beta, and it was a lot more resource management intensive, and it wasn't as fun because of that, to be frank. So where were we? Okay, so you get a chance to cause vulnerability here with the Bone Splinters. You get an additional corpse spawning there. What we have for Corpse Explosion, obviously we pick up the radius, but then we get this additional damage modifier. So 10% increased damage to enemies that are slowed, stunned, or vulnerable. These damage bonuses can stack. So you can get 30% increased damage from this if something is slowed, stunned, and vulnerable. But as it happens, we are a vulnerability build, so you're going to get another 10% damage increase for Corpse Explosion, which is, once again, our main ability when things are vulnerable, which they often are. In other words, instead of 35% increased damage from vulnerability, which was already a super vulnerability, we actually get 45% increased damage from vulnerability as long as you're using Corpse Explosion. So very powerful node here. The other thing about this is that because they stack, you can get another 10% because you curse. And the curse we use is Decrepify, which means we get a slow. They're slowed by 40% and deal 20% less damage for 10 seconds. So that slow, that 40% slow, triggers a secondary 10% from this passive, which means we're getting 20% from this. 10% for the slow, 10% for the vulnerability. So you get 55% bonus damage on Corpse Explosion if you curse and vulnerability an enemy before you Corpse Explode next to them. So very powerful node here that lets you stack these modifiers on top of each other. This is another crazy node. It's not super necessary because, like I said, the essence use for this build is pretty minimal. The only thing you're really spamming is the thing that generates you spirit and the thing that costs no essence. The thing that generates you essence and the thing that costs no essence, which is Corpse Explosion. So this is really good because you're always using corpses, but at this point in the build, I'm not using enough essence for it to be super necessary. It just happens to be very synergistic, so I picked it up. I just buffed this. There's not a lot of things I can do with these points at this point in the game, so I just put them into Skeleton Mastery there. As far as Corpse Tendrils go, it's really just a 1-point wonder. You don't need to put more points in. Eventually, you're going to have enough points so you can max it and lower the cooldown, which will be good, but not a huge deal early on. This is just, you have to get this to get to the good one. This is not bad. Things that get slowed when you first use Corpse Tendrils. This one is amazing. So when things get damaged by Corpse Tendrils, they're made vulnerable for 3 seconds, which means every time I Corpse Tendril, I can guarantee a vulnerability on everything around because the radius is pretty big. And that includes like elite mobs and bosses and champions and all that crap. So that makes the Corpse Tendrils combo extra powerful because you know you get a vulnerability out of it every time. This is a fortify mechanic, which is really good because we're constantly farming corpses. So whenever a corpse is formed by your skills or your minions, fortify for 6% base life, which pretty much keeps me fortified constantly if I'm like fighting constantly. The interesting thing about this build to me, or one of the interesting things about this build to me, is that I actually don't pick up an ultimate, and that's intentional. I don't think I would pick up an ultimate even with more points, because although the Necromancer ultimates are pretty cool, you have Blood Wave, you have the Army of the Dead, and you have Bone Storm, they don't provide a ton of control, and they don't do a ton of damage. So they're really just not that great of an option for this build. Now, Blood Wave does less damage than Corpse Explosion, and doesn't have as good of a modifier path behind it. Army of the Dead, less damage than Corpse Explosion. And by the way, they both have massive cooldowns And then this is also less damage than Corpse Explosion because it's 606 instead of 407, I think. But it's doing it over 10 seconds, so it's actually like 60 damage per second, which is quite bad compared to, I can probably get 2 Corpse Explosions off in a second, which is 800 damage without any modifiers. So they don't really compare to your Corpse Explosion damage, and they have massive cooldowns, and you can't fill them out as easily because they're deeper down the tree. You need more points. So I just didn't pick any up, and I honestly think that even if I was level 100, I still wouldn't pick any up. Because, I mean, if I had more than 6 slots available, I probably would, but I don't because of the way this game has been designed. So I don't think I pick any ultimates up. I picked this up just for a little bit of extra survivability for the skeletons. And I think further on down the line, what you would do with this build instead of getting an ultimate is you would just beef up your minions, beef up the defensive mechanics that you have available to you in the Necro tree. You'd probably pick up Kalen's Edict, you know, just to buff the minions. You'd probably get this whole set of 4 down here eventually, just making your minions powerful. Just a bunch of like utility and minion damage stuff that I think you'd pick up. You'd definitely get Golem Mastery, and you might use a different Golem later on. I don't know what the blood and the iron golems are going to be like. But yeah, that's basically the build so far. I'll put some gameplay up in the background here, and you can check out the playstyle and see if you think it'd be fun. I had a blast making it and playing it. It was sort of just what I gravitated toward when I picked up the Necro. Just seemed like the most fun thing, and it was very effective at clearing through the game. So had a lot of fun playing it. And yeah, I look forward to seeing what the game will be like when it releases. I'll probably play this build at launch, but we'll see. We'll see what we get. So I hope you enjoyed the video. Hope you learned something. Check out the Necro when you play D4 eventually. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next one.